All right, everybody, welcome back in on a Thursday morning to the Stadium Seat Sports Podcast. As always, my name is Coop, here with my partner and co-host Kriv, and today we're going to be looking forward to some of the Week 3 games in college football. And honestly, Kriv, when we look at these games in this upcoming week, you don't really see many marquee matchups, and we kind of think it might be a letdown spot for exciting college football games. But outside of a few marquee matchups in week 2, Texas, Michigan, North Carolina State, Tennessee, Iowa State, Iowa, it didn't look to be a fantastic week in week 2 either in terms of games. And we got blessed with some really, really good games. So potentially, we're going to see the same thing here in week 3. All of us college football fans can be hopeful of that. So before I throw it over to you, first game we're going to be chatting about here is going to be number 20 Arizona taking on number 14 Kansas State. So take it away, man.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point just now. This week, there's only 2 matchups that are ranked versus ranked. But honestly, I think there's a lot of potential for those ranked teams to fall again. So, but kicking things off, this is one of the few ranked versus ranked matchups, as you said, and it's Arizona going to Kansas State. And honestly, I really like Arizona in this matchup. I think Fafita is a very good quarterback. He was definitely a guy who could have hit the transfer portal and gone to the highest bidder and gone to a much bigger program. His upside's really great. They're very dynamic. Obviously, they have McMillan at receiver. They're explosive. And Kansas State had trouble with Tulane last week. They gave up 27 points, I think, in a single score victory. I mean, they look very vulnerable. So, in my opinion, I really like Kansas State here. Avery Johnson is going to have to step up. He didn't look great last week. Obviously, he's getting some of his first real in-season game reps because Will Howard obviously was a starter previously, and he kind of got in there every now and then. But if he doesn't step up, I think Arizona's going to go in there and walk away with a win.
Yeah, no, I think you made a lot of great points in this game, man. And honestly, it's really interesting because I think Avery Johnson's upside is ridiculous with Kansas State, the quarterback there. And I think, primarily that's one of the main reasons that you had Will Howard transfer out and ultimately end up at Ohio State is because he was not going to win that starting job against Avery Johnson at Kansas State. So to see him struggle last week against Tulane the way that he did, ultimately it's not of major concern. He's an extremely young quarterback with not a lot of reps under his belt. The poise is there in certain moments, and obviously the talent is right there. So I do think that Kansas State is going to be poised to win this game. I know Arizona is fantastic, so I'm going a little bit different with you on my pick here. Fafita is fantastic. McMillan at wide receiver is unbelievable, especially what he did there in week 1. I mean, it was just absurd, the numbers he put up. It was basically video game numbers. I think it's going to be a closely contested game. This is one that I had a lot of difficulty picking, truthfully. Like, I went back and forth between Arizona and Kansas State, but ultimately I've got a little bit more faith in what Kansas State brings to the table. And I think Avery Johnson has a bounce back week. So I'm going to take Kansas State in a close game here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it could go any way, and I think it's going to come down to a few big plays here and there and who can limit them the most.
For sure. Absolutely. And the next game we're going to jump into here, guys, is going to be number 16 LSU taking on South Carolina. If you want to take this one first, feel free, and then I'll jump in and give you my thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think all of us are kind of surprised to see South Carolina 2-0. Obviously, they went on the road to Kentucky and pulled out a convincing win. Not a lot of people saw that coming. And I think part of it is Sellers, the freshman quarterback. He is legit. He is very talented. He is a game wrecker. He is prone to mistakes, of course, but he kind of gives them a little oomph that they didn't have beforehand. So I think that's really been the biggest change for them. However, LSU, of course, one loss. They've struggled, but I still like them in this matchup. I think this is a kind of upstart South Carolina team, but LSU still has that top-end talent. And between Nussmeier and Lacey at receiver, I mean, they have a lot of talent and guys who can break games wide open, and I think we're going to see that happen. South Carolina is running off a high right now, and this is just where a young, inexperienced team at home has a letdown against a very talented, angry, one-loss LSU. I would not want to be in South Carolina's shoes, so I'm going to go LSU.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think you made a lot of great points. I just want to give a quick shout out before I jump into this game here and give my thoughts and opinions to South Carolina. They absolutely kicked Kentucky's teeth in last week.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even think South Carolina fans saw that coming. I mean, I'm not sitting here telling you that Kentucky is some, unbelievable program. And I do think Kentucky's got a lot of problems. And a lot of that stems from Stoops, I think, was essentially going to leave for, I believe it was the Texas A&M job, thought that he had it in the bag, and essentially announced that he was going there and ultimately did not end up getting that job. I believe it was the Texas A&M job. That probably leaves a very sour taste in a lot of your players in that program's mouth. And it's hard to get guys to fight for you when you were basically 2 feet out the door, got the door slammed in your face, and then turned around and went back to the program that you were poised to leave. So I wasn't necessarily surprised by the outcome that South Carolina won. The manner in which they did was surprising to me. And, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Any of our viewers and listeners can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe his name is Evan Stewart. That D lineman for South Carolina, the true freshman, is an absolute beast. That guy had a game like I've never seen before in my life. That was unbelievable. And I'm not sure if I got the name correct, so you'll have to let me know if it is.
It's Dylan Stewart.
Dylan Stewart. Okay. There we go. Last name correct, first name not.
Yes.
Dylan Stewart was unbelievable. I mean, that young man put on an absolute clinic. And I think that you hit on a point I really wanted to touch on. And I just wanted to say, Sellers, the quarterback for South Carolina, I think is fantastic. He reminds me a lot of what we discussed with Dylan Raiola, where I think that he has a lot of upside. He's going to make some mistakes, especially because he's young in his career. He doesn't have a lot of reps under his belt. But the upside that young man brings is truly unbelievable. I, however, am going to go with LSU in this game. I just believe in Nussmeier a bit more. He's more experienced. Brian Kelly is a head coach. I think he's going to have LSU ready in this game. I don't think it's going to be any kind of cakewalk for LSU. I think South Carolina has proven that, being 2-0 right now and what they did to Kentucky last week, that they are not going to be some team that you're just going to walk through in the SEC this year like some may have thought they would be. So I'm going to take LSU in this game, but it's going to be a closely contested game in my opinion. And honestly, the reason I'm leaning LSU, I like Brian Kelly a little bit more as a head coach versus what South Carolina brings to the table. And I trust Nussmeier more at this point in his career than I trust Sellers. So I'm going to go LSU in a close one.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think experience is going to outweigh inexperience for sure in this matchup. And then the next game we have here, and I'll let you kick things off, but I think one of the only reasons we're bringing it up is because of last week's performance, and that's Alabama versus Wisconsin.
Yeah. This game really, it interests me because going to Camp Randall is no easy feat, whether it's Camp Randall at night or at noon, which this game is a noon slate. So, maybe a little bit less daunting than going to Camp Randall at night, but Camp Randall is one of the most electric environments in all of college football. And I know that Alabama struggled last week against USF. They struggled against USF in the year prior. So maybe the key for Alabama is just don't schedule USF, because for whatever reason they struggle against them. I don't know what it is, but they struggle significantly with USF. In this game, even given those struggles against USF, I just do not see a path for Wisconsin to win this game. Truthfully, I know it's at Camp Randall. I do not believe in Tyler Van Dyke. I think that he's just proven to be what he is at the collegiate level, which is an average quarterback at best in my mind. Like, he thrived, I believe, in his first year in the spread offense, but that's not what Luke Fickell and Wisconsin are running for him. And so I think he's very limited in his ability to actually get Wisconsin down the field and score significant amounts of points. And yes, Jalen Milroe for Alabama makes mistakes, but he also makes some home runs happen. So Alabama is going to score points, and Alabama's got a very good defense. And one of the strong suits for Wisconsin in years past has been their defensive line. I think their defensive line is pretty weak and insignificant compared to what past Wisconsin D lines have been. So I think Alabama is going to be able to run the ball fairly well in this game. And Jalen Milroe, to me, is a significant advantage over Tyler Van Dyke for Wisconsin. I also, I think Luke Fickell is a very good head coach. He hasn't gotten it right at Wisconsin yet. Doesn't mean that he won't. But I think Kalen DeBoer and what he did at Washington is now going to be able to do the same thing at Alabama. So I'm giving essentially all of the advantages to Alabama in this game outside of having to go play in a significantly tough environment. So I'm going to take Alabama in this game, and I'm going to take them quite large in terms of how much I think that they're going to win by. So excited to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin is definitely, this is David versus Goliath. They do have a few things going for them. And one, of course, is being in Camp Randall. I mean, that's one of the hardest places to play, no matter what team you are. So, and weird things can happen when you're in those environments. So never say never. I do think you kind of mentioned Luke Fickell and everything, and I don't think it's that they're not trying to run a spread. They are running a spread, but the issue is he inherited a traditional Wisconsin team, and he's trying to evolve that roster to actually be able to execute that offense, because he knows he's not going to win. The way Wisconsin played before he got there, you won a lot of games in the regular season, but you never won any big games or made the playoffs. And he knows in order to do that, you have to take that next step and be a dynamic offense, and they just aren't there yet. So, I mean, easily we could see another repeat of last week where USF held tight into the fourth and then crumbled. I think that could happen again. Obviously, Luke Fickell is probably a little better coach than over at USF, but I think Alabama wins this one by at least 10, but if not more.
Yeah. No, I think I would have been pretty surprised if both of us weren't in agreement on that game. The next one we're going to jump in here, and I can certainly take this one first, is going to be number 6 Missouri against number 24 Boston College. This one, to me, it has some intrigue, but similar to the last game, I think Missouri is going to win this game fairly handedly. I know Boston College, they're ranked number 24, they're 2-0. Their big marquee win right now is against Florida State, but I think Florida State has proven to be a lot lesser than what people gave them credit for in the preseason, as they are obviously ranked preseason number 10. I just think Missouri's got better playmakers at essentially all positions on the field. I think, Cook for Missouri he's been honestly pretty average so far this year, but I think the talent is there. Like he's got 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 456 yards passing so far this season. So it's a little bit less than what we maybe anticipated for him, but he's got also threats all over the field at the receiver position. And I think, essentially what it boils down to me is what Drinkowitz brings to the table. I think he's a fantastic head coach in college football. I think he gets overlooked because of where he is at Missouri, and he's not at some top tier program. But to me, he's one of the better coaches in all of college football, in my opinion. So I think Missouri's going to win this game pretty handily. I think Boston College will have some success in running the ball against Missouri, and I wouldn't, suspect that they're going to get, the doors blown off of them. But again, I've got to see it from Boston College in this game, especially because their big signature win is against Florida State, and we've just come to realize that Florida State is not very good this year, to put it nicely.
Yeah, and I agree with your assessment here. I think Boston College, obviously, great start for them, 2-0. Bill O'Brien, he's really maximizing that talent. Beating Florida State was obviously a huge win for them, regardless of how that season's kind of played out for them. But honestly, I think Missouri as a program has kind of started to enter another level. Maybe not a top 5 program, but they have something really good going. They bring in some high level recruits at key positions. So yeah, I agree. I think Missouri's going to win this one pretty handedly. I think Boston College is a great story, but their opponents actually have turned out not to be that great. So this is their first real test on the road, and I think Missouri's going to win it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're going to get to kind of wrapping up the show here in just a few minutes. So we're going to go into our next two games, which are going to be two of our upset alerts for this upcoming week, or at least upset watch. And so that first game is going to be Oregon traveling to Corvallis to take on Oregon State, rivalry game here. So give me your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, so I think obviously Oregon has looked very vulnerable the first 2 weeks. I mean, they're 2-0, but they could easily be 0-2. And that's a crazy thing to say, but it definitely could have happened.
Yep.
And I feel like, I don't know what it is, but like Dylan Gabriel, I think he's been hyper efficient. He gets the ball out of his hands quickly, puts up a ton of yards, and he only has 4 touchdowns. And that to me is pretty surprising. And I mean, Evan Stewart, he's been pretty good, but he only has 8 catches and 127 yards and 1 touchdown in 2 games. And you kind of were expecting a little more high-end upside for him. But of course, that can come in time. But where I think Oregon State comes into play here is their run game. And Griffin, the running back at Oregon State, has almost 250 yards, 3 touchdowns over 2 games. And that has been Oregon's Achilles heel. They have not been able to stop the run. And that is why Boise State almost beat them. That's why they had trouble in week 1 against Idaho State. So honestly, I think, as crazy as it sounds, Oregon State has a very good chance to win this game. And also, it's at home for them. On top of that, it's a rivalry game. And that is the last thing this Oregon football team needs right now, is to go into a rivalry game in state and have it all on the line. I mean, this just spells doom for them, I think. Or it can be that catapult situation where everything finally clicks and they look like they were going to be expected. But I really think it's going to be a very competitive game, and they're going to have to fight really hard to win this one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And shout out Evan Stewart, who I mentioned earlier, the Texas A&M wide receiver transfer over there at Oregon, and then Dylan Stewart, the lineman over at South Carolina. So I knew that name came from somewhere in my brain, but was not correct when I said it earlier.
Yes.
But no, I think you made a lot of great points here in this game. Like, I have said it multiple times on this podcast, like, I am so worried for this Oregon team. And it is not because of the talent that they have. They've got unbelievable talent. I believe in Dan Lanning as a head coach. I think he's a fantastic head coach, or a great head coach with the ability to become a fantastic head coach. They're just a one-dimensional football team because they cannot run the football efficiently. And I've said it multiple times, and I'm going to just continue to beat this dead horse until, they prove otherwise. The biggest and easiest way to mitigate a talent gap, which Oregon and Oregon State have in this case, like Oregon State's significantly less talented than Oregon, is to make them one-dimensional. And right now, it's not even opponents making Oregon one-dimensional. Oregon is making themselves one-dimensional. Now they've got some injuries on the offensive line, and I understand that. But like, when they can't run the ball and it's all on Dylan Gabriel, no matter how good Dylan Gabriel is and has the ability to be, when you're one-dimensional, that's a significant problem. And this is a rivalry game. You basically throw out certain talent advantages and other advantages for teams when it comes to a rivalry game, because crazy things happen in rivalry games. I would have to go back and double check, but I had looked this up earlier in the week. I believe that Oregon has lost 3 of the last 5 games against Oregon State when it's at Corvallis there, and it's obviously at Corvallis this year, or in Corvallis rather, this year. So I'm very worried for this Oregon team. Like, I know Genty with Boise State, he's an otherworldly talent. Like, that guy is absolutely, in my opinion, going to be in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Very well could find himself winning it. But Oregon State doesn't have slouches at the running back position. And Oregon's defense got carved up last week on the run game. And again, Genty, unbelievable. But at the same point in time, Oregon State's offensive line is better than Boise State's offensive line. So even if Oregon State's stable of running backs is not as good as what Boise brings to the table with Genty, I think Oregon State's going to have a lot of success running the football in this game. And honestly, I'm I'm calling the upset. I'm not even taking Oregon State in the spread. I think that Oregon State wins this game outright. I've got until I see it from Oregon. I'm taking Oregon State in this game. I really am. I've been highly concerned with their game against Idaho and then Boise State last week, where they had to have a punt return for a touchdown and win on a last second field goal to win it. I think Oregon State wins this game.
Yeah, I think that they can definitely do it. And I think the next game for our upset of the week uh, is Notre Dame versus Purdue, and I think the reason is very similar to Oregon, except Notre Dame actually lost the game.
Yep.
They have looked pedestrian against inferior opponents, and when you see that, you start to see some of those cracks in the foundation. And I mean, man, Notre Dame last week losing to Northern Illinois. I mean, geez, I can't even wrap my brain around losing to a team that has never beat a top 10 team ever. At home
Crazy.
after winning quite possibly the biggest game of Notre Dame's recent seasons. So,
Yeah.
and let's be honest, Purdue and West Lafayette has hosted and has led to many upsets. So,
Very true.
I mean, you can't go in there and expect to win. Riley Leonard has not lived up to his pedigree, I guess, coming from the transfer portal. He was supposed to be kind of a game-changing, complete kind of quarterback, and turns out he can't really throw downfield. And I mean, honestly, I know Notre Dame is more talented at pretty much every position. I mean, they got a good running back with Love and Collins at receiver and a few other transfer players. I mean, they should be dominating teams, and Purdue should easily be a double-digit win. But I see this being a one-score game, and honestly, I think Notre Dame will pull it out because their back is against the wall now. They need to win out, but it's going to give them another scare. And don't be surprised if Purdue has a shot at the end to kind of pull out this upset.
Yeah. No, I think you hit on a lot of fantastic points there. And honestly, I mean, I would have to go double check the year, but I believe it was 2018 when Purdue absolutely steamrolled Ohio State, at Purdue's house with that great Urban Meyer team. And you mentioned it, like you shouldn't have to worry about going into Purdue and winning a football game, but there's something about playing Purdue, especially at their house, that is just incredibly difficult for whatever reason. I don't know what it is, but it makes for some fantastic college football. And you do have to be majorly concerned because Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois last week after everyone around the country was giving them significant praise for going into Kyle Field and handling what everyone thought was a very good Texas A&M team. And so people were saying, okay, Marcus Freeman's got this team ready. This is a legitimate 12-team playoff contending team. Potentially, if they get things right and they continue to improve, maybe even competing for a national championship at the end of the year. And then they go and they lay an egg against Northern Illinois, and you're just sit there scratching your head because this is the third time that Marcus Freeman has done this. And I mentioned it in our recap of last week. It's unacceptable for this to happen in year 3 rather. Like, this just cannot happen. And you hit on it, and I think I hit on it as well when we were doing our recap of this game against Northern Illinois and Notre Dame last week. Riley Leonard, he can run the ball. He's useful with his legs in many situations. But Notre Dame can't move the ball down the field vertically at this point in time. And they've got a great running back in Love, as you mentioned. They've got some studs at wide receiver. I think they've got a very solid defense. And because of that solid defense and because of them getting embarrassed against Northern Illinois the week prior, I am going to take Notre Dame in this game because I think Marcus Freeman, hopefully, fingers crossed, Notre Dame fans will have them ready to come out playing with their hair on fire because, as you mentioned, their backs are against the wall. But going into Purdue's house and playing them is no easy feat. Just ask Ohio State and ask many other teams that have gone in there as big favorites and have come out losers. So would I be shocked to see Purdue win this game after seeing Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame last week? No, I wouldn't. but I'm going to take Notre Dame because I believe in Marcus Freeman as a head coach. I think he's going to have his team ready, and I think that they win a closely contested, hard-fought game.
Yeah, and I think Marcus Freeman, people forget, he is still a very inexperienced coach. And I actually just saw something, and the Northern Illinois head coach reached out to him to offer help. And Marcus Freeman was receptive to that. And I think that shows a lot of humility. And he wants to get it right. And he shows flashes all the time, but he knows he has to grow as a coach. And I think that's why we've seen these random upsets every year with him. So
Yeah.
if he can ever figure that out, I think he can be a great coach. But I know for Notre Dame, you're in the spotlight. You're expected to win every game. I mean, it's a tough world, and hopefully he has a chance to figure that out. But he's definitely trying. So
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and that's a very positive sign for Notre Dame fans is when your coach can accept humility, that's where growth comes from. When you can accept blame and be like, man, I did not have my team prepared, or whatever it was that led Notre Dame to lose that game, I think that that's huge. So no, it's a great point, and it's a good thing for Marcus Freeman and that Notre Dame program moving forward, I think. And before we wrap it up, we kind of hinted on certain things throughout our picks here. We're just going to go over our picks, individual picks of the week. Mine, personally, I mentioned on it, and I'm not even just taking the spread, but it's going to be Oregon State minus 16 against Oregon. I'm picking Oregon State outright, but Oregon State minus 16 is my pick of the week.
plus 16, but yeah.
Or plus 16, rather. Yeah, plus 16.
Yeah. Oregon's bad, but they're not that bad.
No, plus 16.
And for me, I guess this must be the underdog week because I'm going Arizona plus 7 against Kansas State. And honestly, just like you, I think you could go money line. So, of course, I mean, take the points. But if you're feeling super risky and want to get that sweet payout, hey, I'm not going to shy away from money line. So. Totally up to you, but I'm sticking with my underdog pick today.
Yeah, I love it. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this podcast. Any kind of likes, subscription really helps us out. Leave your comments down below. Give us your thoughts on how we're doing, and if you guys have any differing opinions from what we said. And we'll see you guys at the next recording.